Hey Tim, thanks for being on, man. I know this is a lot of work. You're probably busy. And what time is it over there in Washington right
Yeah,
now?
it's four p.m. Dan.
And then right,
Great to be here.
yeah. And I'm glad it's Roger who said, "Hey, why don't you interview Tim Toe concerning the Charles S. Robert Awards?" And it's for some reason it never dawned on me, and I thought this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Tim,
happy to be here.
okay, I'm probably going to take some questions from the audience, like we had said. Excuse me, and there's no questions now. So you know what? What's your background in wargaming?
Sure. Well, I bought my first war game at Toys R Us, so you can remember the days when it was sold at full retail.
Yeah,
And that's how long I've been playing war games.
I know, man. Well, yeah, I know. I remember that. I remember when Toys R Us opened up, but I think I was in my non-war game phase because I think I had children, so we went into the children's department, and I never really, you know, took a look at the place because my kid was screaming and wanted this, he wanted that. That's like, seriously.
Yeah. Well, Toys R Us is no more now, but war games have survived.
So I mean, Charles S. Robert Awards. This is a prestigious award that's been around for a long time. What, 1975, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, 1975 was the first awards for games published in 1974.
And like, what, how? Like, did you fall down, hit your head to take on such a huge undertaking like this? Like, how did you become involved with Charles S. Robert Awards?
Okay, great question. Well, first, the main reason I wanted to be involved was first I was trying to find to buy a game, my next war game this year, and I said, well, why don't I look at who won the awards, who was nominated, and who won the awards this year. So I went and looked for Charles S. Roberts Awards winners, and I saw that the last time the awards were issued were in 2012. I said, wait, what happened? What happened to these awards? So I looked around, I searched on Board Game Geek, and found the only thread I found was actually a thread dated to 2014, and it said that someone, hey, these awards are gone. I'd love to resurrect them. I saw a few other threads throughout the years, but then nothing else. So I contacted the person who wrote that thread, a gentleman in Italy named Riccardo Ruggiero, and I asked him what happened. He said, "Oh, I don't know. No one really had any answer. Why don't you go contact Roger McGowan?" So I just emailed Roger on Board Game Geek and then had a conversation with him and asked him, "Hey, what happened to these awards?" And he just said, "Well, we just stopped giving them." I said, "Well, should we give them again?" And he said, "Yeah, why not? Do you want to do it?" So I looked at the awards. I personally feel that the awards are always interesting. In many cases, a lot of industries offer awards for every single thing, and you may have multiple awards for the same thing. I think there are many Best Actor awards, the Oscars, the Emmys, the Grant, everything. So the Charles S. Roberts Awards, because of the history of the awards and because of the way they're structured, they're not an industry voted on award. They're intended to be an award voted on by wargamers. The awards were initiated by a gentleman named John Mansfield, who actually ran a game store in Winnipeg, Canada. And so he was the one who originated the awards in 1975 and issued them at the Origins convention.
Now, Tim, you don't have any ties to any publishing companies. Are you a war game designer?
I'm always a wannabe war game designer, so one day maybe I'll design something. But for now, I have no published designs.
Now, I know there's always any award competition board, whatever you want to call it. There's always conflicts of interest. How are you going to manage that, Tim? And who's the referee in something like that?
Okay, well, I think the only potential conflicts of interest in this case are actually the conflicts of interest are how we publicize the awards and who are they going to be who's going to be doing the voting. So the voting is open to anyone who wants to submit a ballot. The only requirement we have is they have to list the contact information, email and physical address, and that's for us just to validate the votes. We've also have asked people if they want to be contacted afterwards for marketing purposes. So the main purpose of that is if enough voters are interested, people know that people who are motivated to vote are motivated war gamers in most cases. Okay. So it's at least a good mail list for people. But there is the only conflict of interest is in possibly adjudicating the votes. Because we're using a free-form text ballot, there may be cases where the game name is misspelled. We'll have to adjudicate spelling of names. But it's all documented in our charter on the website about what we'll do. We're only looking at adjudicating ineligible entries. If you vote for a game that's a Napoleonic game for a World War II category, that would be ineligible. And we will likely not move that over to the Napoleonics victory, unless you look at the ballot and determine, was there an intention that he just typed it in wrong?
Now,
for the most part, we're not doing much with the ballots. The ballots are what people will submit, and we'll total them up and announce the winner based on the most votes for the winners in each category, and the next 4 highest vote getters will be considered nominees.
Okay, Tim, I'm going to bounce around from era to era to subject because you just brought up something Napoleonic games and or pre-Napoleonic games.
Mm-hmm.
There's a category, best ancients to pre-Napoleonic era board games. I understand when I look at it in terms of, if I would be doing an awards thing, that would minimize the huge amount of work that this Charles S. Roberts demands. Now, best ancients to pre-Napoleonic, that's large. Is there any way, or in the future, is that going to be expanded on?
Yeah, great question. So the last iteration of the Charles S. Roberts Awards actually had ancients to Napoleonics was the earliest category. And so we added the Napoleonics category primarily because Napoleonics is a big enough category, particularly in Europe and actually around the world. And so we felt that that was a category that merited its own attention. In terms of whether it will expand the categories, yes, we could consider expanding the categories in the future. But then you run into issues like, do you want to have a specific game period on how many years? Ancients, do you want, when you say ancients, is it pre-Roman Empire? Do you want to have one on the Roman Empire, early Roman Empire, late Roman Empire?
Oh, my God.
It's easy to bifurcate it into as many categories as you would want. So another case was we have the post-Napoleonic through pre-World War II era. So some folks asked us, should we break out a separate World War I era? And for the Americans, should we break out an American Civil War section? Should we break out a Colonial War section? The question is, how many games are published in those categories? I think there's a large number, definitely, of American Civil War games.
Absolutely.
There's a fair number of World War I games as well, but Crimean War games. How many Crimean War games are there? So the question is...
Yeah, I know. And that's why, I mean, I ask these questions with a lot of trepidation here because, like I said, man, I try to think of something to do like this, and it's just huge. Like, how many do you have a board of, I guess, a board of people that work with you doing this? Yes.
So so after Roger asked me to work on this, he said, why don't you pick out, find a group of people who want to work with you, people who are apolitical and will have good contacts among the fan base, among just the war gamers in general. So a couple of the folks that we put on here, for instance, Mark Acosta, he runs grognard.com, which is,
right.
Then you may remember, this used to be the site that was, I think, the precursor to Board Game Geek, precursor to Concept World.
Yeah.
It's a database of primarily war games. And so he obviously cares a lot about war games. He's the current runner maintainer of that site. Another person that we have on the board is Lawrence Hung, who is a big time gamer in Hong Kong. And I've followed Lawrence Hung's interest and his participation on Board Game Geek and Concept for many years.
Right, I know.
And he is someone who is familiar with war games and is a person who, particularly being in Asia, helps us get a balance of contacts in Asia in order to promote the Charles S. Roberts Awards there.
Well, I mean, you've got no problem with me with Da Costa because he's Italian. How can an Italian be crooked? I'm joking. Yeah. And what else? Can you name anybody else on the board?
Yeah, Rory Arward, who is a longtime gamer in New York. When he returned from service in Afghanistan, he games mostly in New York now. But he's been a long-time gamer, big-time member of, I think, ASL Fun City in New York. And so an active war gamer and someone who has a very good perspective on the wargaming hobby, having been in the military and participating in some military-style simulations as well.
And are there any brick and mortar store owners who are part of the board? And if they're not, is there a problem with them being part of the board?
No, there is no problem with having them be part of the board. So right. The primary job of the board is to help get the word out, help refine the categories as they are. So this year, before we issued the ballot, I asked the board, hey, these are the categories we want. What should we do? So a couple of new categories that people have added were the Napoleonics, then we decided also to break out graphics. Originally, there was only one single war game board graphics category. So I break it up into three. We break out into best rules, best playing components, and best map graphics. Mainly because those are, and actually there's also best cover art. So we actually have another category, a fifth category. Because in many cases now board gaming is so specialized. You have specialized artists who do counters only, who do maps, and of course cover paintings as well.
Right. Now, best cover art. I love Roger B. McGowan. I love him with all my heart. Less so than Harold Buchanan, that's for sure, because I didn't meet the guy. And he's such an icon in the industry. Now, when he said, "Why don't you take it over, Tim?" is Roger at all implicated in any vote whatsoever?
So Roger wants to step away from any active management of this. So he had no say actually in the creation of the categories. The main reason Roger is involved is that he was granted the right to use Charles S. Roberts' name by Charles S. Roberts originally. So that is the genesis of why Roger's involved in this game, in this whole effort. Yeah.
I mean, and what better man? I mean, and if anybody out there thinks that Roger has a crooked bone in his body, I don't even know the man, and I'm going to tell you, no. If he says he's going to step out, he's going to step out. So that's great. I'm glad you answered that.
Yep. And a couple of the other categories we added because of the growth of computer gaming. We decided we want to keep the computer gaming categories. We also added a category for best war game assist module. So it's either the Vassals, the Cyberboards, the tabletop simulator games that people may have written to aid in the play of war games, particularly remotely via through online contact these days.
So Tim, this is a personal opinion of mine. Why don't you just drop all the computer games and keep it to board games? Make life much easier for you and the rest of the, I guess, the wargaming grognard world, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So the reason we wanted to keep computer war games is I think ultimately war games are going to move to the computer space. There's always going to be at least for my lifetime, there are going to be board, paper, manual war games. And that's what we typically are rewarding. The majority of the wars are for these board, paper, war games. The computer games, there is a certain amount of computer war gaming that's taking place. Whether or not you consider a first-person shooter a war game, or you consider more complex 4X type game a war game, those are still games that have simulation capabilities. They represent problem solving. They represent conflict resolution. And so they should be eligible to be voted on. And by opening this up to people who are interested in war games, as I said, you don't have to vote on every category. So if you're a computer gamer, you can vote for your best computer war game. And I think what this is this reflects the interest and the opinions of the voter base. We're trying to make this as broad a voter base as possible. We're advertising as many venues as possible. We've tweeted it out to major publishers, computer game publishers, and given everyone an opportunity to see and vote and participate in this award. But I think not ignore if the question you asked is, should we just skip all the computer categories?
Yeah,
I don't think we can at this point.
That was my question. Like, keep it, I don't know, keep it, for lack of a better word, family friendly, like forget war games. They have their own awards, and keep it to paper. But I know what you're saying, man. In the future, paper, first of all, paper is going to be an issue. So yes, yeah. I see where you're going with this.
Right, but also if a war gamer, if you are a war gamer, you're voting on these games, and you say, hey, I'm tired of setting up one of these games. I want to try a computer game. You will at least have someone's opinion of, hey, this is a good computer war game. They'll give you a war gaming experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know exactly what you're saying. I can't believe it right now, just getting into a like Vassal type thing. And the setup time is just cut drastically. And there's an appeal to that, And not war game, Tim. Who decides what a war game is?
So basically, who decides what a war game is? So we're allowing people to vote for any game that, as long as it fits in the category. So Napoleonics, it has to be a game that's based on Napoleonic warfare. So you look at what are considered war games. Is Command and Colors Napoleonic? Is that a war game, or is that I think it's a war game.
I think it's a war game.
Yeah, it's simple enough, but it's also doesn't have the specific historical factors in it that make it a fully accurate simulation.
Well, I mean, there's the scenarios. Try
Yeah.
to recreate that as best as possible.
Yeah.
And what
A
about like?
maneuver. Would a game like Maneuver be considered a Napoleonics game? So,
I don't know. I don't know.
okay.
Now, here's the question, and you know I'm going to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
Would Twilight Struggle be considered a war game?
Yes, absolutely.
I would think so too, and I agree with you, Tim.
Right. But then you start looking at, and again, these games are published already, but Settlers of Catan, is that considered a war game or not?
I would personally, and I mean, who am I? I would say no.
Mm-hmm.
But is a game like Root considered a war game, or Roots? I don't know what there's a new game that just came out. I think it plays like a coin game. I know Herman Lutman was talking to me about it, and I think Herman Lutman, it was only he was talking about it, and he was saying, "Man, this is a war game." But
yeah, so essentially, if it fits into a category, it fits within a historic milieu. We have two. Basically, we have two types of awards. There's the milieu awards, which are basically historical periods or categories. So either it's a World War II game, a Napoleonics game, a Cold War game, or a science fiction or fantasy game. So that's just the genre of the game itself. Then there's the format of the game, whether that fits into a magazine format. It's a print and play type game. And so those are the categories. Plus, there are the computer game categories as well.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's up to the voters because we're broadening this out. Is anyone who's motivated enough to vote for a game would qualify? If someone wanted to vote for that game, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so if someone votes for Root, you will take that into consideration.
Yes.
Hey, okay, no, great stuff. And do the people on the board have to have played these war games?
No, because we're not adjudicating war game. We're not adjudicating quality of the games itself. It's the voters who are voting on the games.
Okay.
We're not making any judgment. The only judgments I said we're making are if the entries are illegible or issued in the wrong category.
Okay, great. Let's take a question from Nathaniel Robinson. I think he speaks French, but it's going to be an English question.
Okay, bonjour, Nathaniel.
Hi, bonjour, bonjour. Yeah, Nathaniel. Here's Nathaniel's questions. Were there games that did not have sufficient attention because there were no Roberts Awards?
Well, I would think so, because as I said, I personally looked at the Charles S. Roberts Awards as a way of winnowing down the list of what game I should buy next. And it's just one factor among many factors. Obviously, designer, theme, genre are all other factors. But the fact that it was a Charles S. Roberts Award winner meant that at least several hundred voters voted for that game as being the top game of that year. And so because there were no awards issued between 2012 and 2013 and 2018, there's a 5-year gap in which no games were awarded.
Okay.
So many games like Churchill, Mark Herman's design on the big three battles against Nazi Germany and Japan, that was not issued an award. Games like A Distant Plane, games like I'm trying to think of some other games that off the top of my head, but as I said, I can't think of them because there were no awards that were issued during that time.
So okay, yeah, because I mean I would consider Churchill. I mean, politics and war go hand in hand for me, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, I mean, obviously the politicians will start the war. I hope I didn't say anything controversial here, people, but I think that's the way it is. And a game like Churchill, I would think 100% this is a war game. A game like Twilight Struggle, yeah, it's a Cold War. I mean, that's why they called it a Cold War, because it was a Cold War. All right, Harold, I'm talking to you. And yeah, sorry, I'm getting carried away, Tim. You know what? Let's see here. Blah, la, 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 la. What about like we do have a print and play category on the CSR awards. Is that right, Tim?
Yes, we do. It's called amateur board game. So essentially it has to be a game that is not announced for publication or for Kickstarter funding. So we know that a lot of Kickstarter games have print and play versions. They produce or release as part of the Kickstarter process. But any game that once you announce it for Kickstarter funding, it's not considered amateur anymore.
So basically, it's the people who vote, and you guys basically just, when I say you guys, the board, just basically manage all these votes. You have absolutely no input in this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's correct.
Okay. There's a category here, and we were talking about this before. It's a best professional war game magazine and best amateur game magazine. Now, if a magazine makes $1, it's a professional magazine.
Not necessarily, because magazines that are typically, we're looking at magazines. The distinction between a professional magazine and amateur magazine, as we defined it, is that a professional magazine is one that's printed in hard copy format and distributed and sold at retail through third parties. So many of the amateur magazines, they do try and make money. They do sell their sell subscriptions. They sell individual copies, and many of these magazines are printed as well, but not many of them are sold through third parties. They're generally sold direct. So the question is this is just a line we had to draw in the sand. A professional magazine is a magazine that, hey, you are selling it at retail, meaning you're printing copies, you're producing inventory, and you're distributing that inventory to be sold through third parties. If you're doing print on demand, if you're doing just a web or non-print format, then you're considered amateur. So in the past, if you look at the winners, Panzer Digest and Board Gamer were magazines that won in the amateur category.
Yes. But I mean, Panzer Digest, I understand my opinion again, I understand the amateur category of it, but this was a well-respected magazine. This was, who was it, Gary Graber? It was
Gary Graber, yes.
Yeah, it was a well-respected magazine, and it's still sought after getting this game. So would you consider that a amateur game magazine?
At this point, I think that he is distributing some number of copies at retail. Yeah, I'm not correct. I've not looked at his magazine in a long time, but I do know he's a publication, and so I would think that he probably bleeds over into the professional magazine category as well. As of course, that puts him in the same category as Strategy and Tactics and Ve Victis. Battles magazine.
Yeah, Ve Victis is I think it's a cut above in terms of production than the Panzer Schreck, or what does he call it now, Gary Graber? He calls it
actually, I can't remember what he called it. I thought it was Panzer Digest was the last.
I think it's Panzer Digest. I think you're right. Okay. Let me see here. Let me check if any more questions here. Let me see. Okay. So, what about video content? What about and it's curious, why wasn't and this is a conflict of interest of mine. Why hasn't podcasts or YouTube channels been categorized?
Good question. So I think that was primarily because there was some unfamiliarity with the podcasts that were available. I surveyed the board of governors, asked them, like, how many war game podcasts are there, and should we have a podcast category or video cast category? And it actually harkens back to what the awards reward. The awards, for the majority, reward physical production or physical products. And I'm not arguing that a webcast or videocast is not a physical product, but it technically isn't, unless you're probably not burning your videos onto DVDs and not selling the recordings at retail.
I see.
So it's hard to say, because in the past, some people would just create a cyberboard module. One company used to just create cyberboard modules for these massive war games. Should those be considered a war game or not? They had rules and they had a cyberboard module for it. Actually, at the time, it was an aide-de-camp module. And I believe that those were not considered publication. They would be considered print and play versions, because you technically could print them out, but they weren't considered for a full-blown war game category, even though they had rule books that are like 150 pages long.
Yeah.
So I think in the future, next year, we probably will have a podcast or videocast category. But right now, podcasts and videocasts do qualify. Technically, I would say that you could actually vote for a podcast as an amateur magazine publication, because you don't have a physical format and you're not distributed at retail. And you can also be voted for the best article or best game review. So historically, those have been a specific article or a specific review. But in looking at the voting, people have nominated just the name of a podcast or review. So if you want to put a plug in for nominations, you can look at those categories as a possibility for a podcast or videocast.
Now, and you know what, again, Tim, my heart goes out to you for taking on this incredible undertaking. And I know it's going to be a great job, but you're going to get flack from the internet, because the internet is cruel. But are you thinking of expanding the board to a different age people?
Yeah, I would love to expand the board. It's ultimately how many people are willing to volunteer and how many people are willing to help do the work and publicize these awards. So I think we definitely are looking at expanding the board to more participants. And so if anyone's interested, please have them contact me.
Yeah, I know. You know what? I mean, I'd be interested, but right away, my name, conflict of interest in terms of podcasts or video content. So, I mean, it's just useless for me to to
Well,
apply.
not necessarily. So originally we had a concept of assembling what we would call the board of advisors. So that would allow anyone to join. There would be publishers, podcasters, designers, developers, anyone involved in industry. We were intending to structure that after we finish this round of awards as a regular meeting, possibly quarterly, for people to provide input onto the awards and onto the process. And so there would be non-binding. There'll be just a meeting of advisors who can help provide input into what they think the awards should be. And ultimately, I think we bring it up to the Board of Governors and have them on a vote determine, hey, should this be a new category that we need to add? And is this particular input advisable? Do you want to tweak one of the definitions of the categories?
Tim, let me take another question here from, again, Nathaniel Robinson. He's the guy. So will the CSR remain a People's Award for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first posed this to Roger, I asked him, hey, why were the awards stopped? Was it because of voter apathy? Because I just look at the general voter turnout rates among political elections in the United States. It's low in general. And I was just wondering, was it just because of low voter turnout? He said, no, absolutely not. And I asked him, do you want to try and winnow the list down and give people a chance? Because personally, from my perspective, when I last saw the award ballot, I would see lists of like several hundred games, and my eyes just glazed over, and I didn't want to issue a vote because I didn't have any educated opinion on many of the games. So for now, we are going to maintain and keep it a People's Award. We're not going to do any pre-selection, and I think by having a free-form ballot, it allows people to put in the games that they want, as long as they fit the category definitions. So in the cases of Root or Settlers of Catan, if those are games that fit that you would consider a war game, feel free to vote for that game. We don't want to constrain the awards in any way, so that's why we're keeping it as a People's Award. But Roger's main perspective was, hey, always make it as a vote of the Vox Populi type effort.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So there's no controversy and all that. I had a good question, but see, I'm ADD, so there was a squirrel that went by and I completely lost, like, where are we type thing. There's a category that it encompasses solitaire and cooperative games. Now, solitaire being such a huge market on its own, and cooperative being such a huge market on its own, isn't that like having best supporting actress and best boy type thing together? I mean, these are
great.
Two completely different categories that should have been on their own.
Yeah, great question. I think that definitely there are tons of cooperative games in what you would consider the non-war game market. In the war game market, typically it's solitaire or confrontational type games. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we felt that at least that was one category we should just keep things together. I guess in the future, as we look at it, should we break them out into separate categories or not?
I would think so. I mean, personally, again, I would think so. And is there going to be like an actual physical award given to the winners, or is it just a bragging rights type thing?
Well, since we're all volunteer effort, Roger has agreed to produce certificates. So whether those will be the official awards in that format. He will produce banners and logos for people to use to advertise the games as Charles S. Roberts Awards winners. But right now, there's no physical award yet at this point, other than a certificate.
Now, how would you feel about, and how controversial would this be if you actually asked people for not a donation, but if you're going to use this ballot, this and that, it costs $1 or $2, so you can have a physical award. Is that a good idea? Yes, no.
We could consider that. I'd just like to keep as less friction in the system as possible. Any type of monetary pay gate tends to disincentivize people. But I think if the awards are sufficiently well received, and maybe we'll survey the populace. Would you have survey the voters? Would you have voted if there was a dollar or nominal fee to pay for the right to vote?
Wow, you're in a really tough situation,
Yeah,
Tim.
I yeah, and I know vote. Yeah, having a physical award would be great. I
Yeah,
think people remember those physical awards much more than they remember the plaudits or the ephemeralness of
yeah.
email. But for now, we don't want to put a barrier under the voting. I think at this point, we're not no admission fee this year. Probably, I can't say what we'll do next year, but let's see how the awards go this year first.
Yeah, maybe you can run a Patreon thing. I don't know how.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Again, conflicts of interest. We just are concerned if someone, a company or someone donates X amount of dollars, what does that mean?
we spoke a little bit about this before. In what was it, in 1987? When did the CSR awards, the Charlies, stop?
Yep. So they actually they actually stopped in 2012, but you're talking about the transition from when they used to be given at Origins to when they went over to the World Board Gaming Championships. Actually, they went to what was called AvalonCon
Right.
first, which was the board game convention started by Don Greenwood with Avalon Hill. So they moved over in 1988, and that was apparently that was because one of the reasons was because Fortress America won for Best War Game of the Year. So Fortress America by Hasbro obviously is a game, and it won the award that year. And the more traditional people, the traditional war gamers, felt that was a heresy. It should not have won. And there might have been some other issues with the way the Origins awards were being shifted to, because now what I see that Origins does is you have to be a member of the voting committee in order to vote on the awards that are issued at Origins.
Now, was there a problem with it's I guess the old traditional grognards, if we're going to call them that, just to put a label on it. Like, how much sway did these guys have, man, to stop the Charlies?
Well, they didn't stop the Charlies. They just moved the venue from where they were presented.
And so that was a factor.
Yeah, that was a factor. I think also because Origins is still a big game convention. There's still a significant war game presence there, but the majority of the focus at Origins is not on war games. And the focus of a convention that's focused on war games had shifted to AvalonCon at that time. And he felt that there was more of a dedicated focus. It would be more well received there. The voting never did not change. The voting process did not change. You still submitted a ballot for the Charlies. It was just where the venue of where they were presented was changed.
Now, the problem, was it with Hasbro, having Hasbro there, or having Fortress America as the game there? What was the problem for these grognards?
Yeah, well, I think the problem was having a game like Fortress America win. So Fortress America, as you think about it, has figures, has area movement, and relatively simple rules. It was the theme, hypothetical invasion of America in the near future, definitely fits in a war gamey type theme. Yes. I think it was just the mechanics. People felt it was too simple of a game to win.
People thought it was too simple. Now, this is where I go off the rails here, Tim. Hold on, where is it? So, a game like this, which is a simple game, which is a crossover game, which is a fantastic game, they would have a problem with this.
Yes. So, I was not present at the Origins 1988, so I can't comment on the details. But I think that people felt that it was undeserving of the award for Best War Game.
Undeserving, but the people voted.
Right.
So what's undeserving about a democratic way of doing things?
So there's always the questions about potential ballot stuffing of games. And so people were concerned that because of the large print runs of a Hasbro, you're going to have a lot more people see the game. A lot more people will, obviously voted for the game. And that's also a danger now of many of the awards. A lot of the smaller publishers feel that they can't compete with the larger print runs of the games. So if some company prints, I don't think any companies really print 15,000 copies now.
No.
At least in more games, but a larger print run means more people have more exposure to it. A lot of people who are fans of certain companies will vote for those products over others. So one of the reasons we went without a formal list of games is to let people vote for what games they feel are deserving.
And you said ballot stuffing. I mean, really, at this level, there's ballot stuffing or rumors of ballot stuffing. I swear to God, it really pisses me off. Me, I would take this game and smash it over their heads. But anyways, can you elaborate on this?
Yeah. So right now, the reason we ask people to register is we just want to make sure that the vote is a legitimate vote. We probably aren't going to go and audit every single person who voted. But at least do a spot check to make sure that these votes are coming in from legitimate source.
Yeah. Man,
but yeah, ballot stuff. It's just I don't think it's I don't think we should be that concerned about, but just be aware of the possibility.
You know, and people, I thought this wargaming community, we were all friends and family. It never occurred to me that some families are dysfunctional. So now I got to go back in my head, and Tim, I'm just ranting here. I got to go back in my head and think, do I trust this? Do I trust this guy? Whatever. Oh my God, I thought we were a happy, loving family. Anyways, I guess we're not.
Yeah, well, it's competition. I think that by being award winner, you hopefully will get some boost in sales. And people sometimes feel it's a zero-sum game. If you win, then I lose. But ultimately, right now, the war game market is looking at the number of publications out there. There's enough in the market. People are buying games.
Yeah.
Whether this will affect on the margin that someone buys this game over that game, then it will have some effect. But ultimately, it's the product that's there. If someone buys a Charles S. Roberts award winner game and then plays it and says, "Wow, this didn't deserve the award. Why I don't like this game at all." Same thing with the Oscars. Movies that win the Best Picture are not necessarily the best picture, but it still gives people an idea of what they may want to watch. And the game in the Charles S. Roberts, it's just another factor in people's decisions. As I said, I look at the awards. Did it win an award? Who was the designer? Who's the publisher? Who did the graphics? Those help me make a decision on a particular game. I don't use one factor over another. I think this just helps people. But I think as you mentioned, the politics of the industry is like any industry. People
I know.
the threat from something that affects them.
Yeah, like big business.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, you sound like a good-hearted person and a straight-ahead person. And my God, will we be taken advantage of, Tim? I just want to say that.
Yeah, I hope not.
No. And let me see here. Let me see if we have some questions from the people, because I just we ran down. You and we spoke very quickly here. And it still freaks me out that the old grognard. When I say the old grognards, there are new grognards that take on the old mentality that if it's not a hex and counter game, it's not considered a war game. And I totally disagree. And I mean, I don't know how to change or how to convince someone that an area impulse game is also a war game. A game like this, Paolo Mori's Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes. How absurd is that? Hey, it's a war game, man. It's a war game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, World War II in 20 minutes is a ridiculous thing to think of. But I got no time to play a 15-year game. I'd rather play a 20-minute game, move on, and play David Thompson's Undaunted Normandy. That's just the way I am. So,
yeah, well, I think that it's always a factor. You have to look at a game in its own integrity. Is it worth the time and playing? Do you have time, and will you learn an important lesson out of a 4-foot by 4-foot map with 2,000 counters? Is that going to give you the same learning experience as Undaunted? But there's a market for each of those. And ultimately, how effective is that game at teaching you something? I always look at games as teaching instruments. Do I learn something from playing the game? And so I think the War Game Award should help reflect that. I don't necessarily quite say, hey, you vote for these games because they're the best teaching games. No, there are many factors that will determine why someone will vote for a game. Is it fun? Is it something that'll teach them something? Is it historically accurate? People can make of the award what they want. But Charles S. Roberts, if you recall, he founded Avalon Hill.
Yes.
So he's pretty much the originator of the commercial war game as we've seen it. And even his first war game actually didn't have hexes, had squares.
Yeah, I know.
Hexes are just a particular format of regulating movement and structure on a board. Become very popular, and even though I think we will start moving beyond hexes in many cases to other factors, especially if you start looking at granularity, particularly you look at online war games. There are no hexes, but there's still something that regulates movement. There's still some type of mechanics behind the process.
And the reason why I'm showing this game, I am not getting any money for advertising these games. And you're talking about hexes, squares, whatever. I know there's a Lock and Load Publishing. Mm-hmm. Which one is it? Days of Heroes, where there's squares. And yes. It deals with modern day combat.
Yeah, Mogadishu. I remember that game.
Right. So there's this guy. This is a 4-stage game. He's got the triangle system, and it's an air game, so you can move a little bit more. Your movements in air are a little bit more detailed. So he has this triangle system. So I guess you'd consider this a war game. It's World War I, Ages of Dogfight. It says World War I. So, anyways, as you can see, it pisses me off a little bit, Tim.
Yeah, I think this helps frame people's minds. If a war game has hexes, that's a way for some people to frame a war game. Yeah, and people just like pattern recognition. People like finding a pattern to frame and narrow things down. If a war gamer, he said, "Well, I love these games because they have hexes. If they have hexes, I won't like it."
Okay, because I guess they're used to moving in that diagonal, that 6 hex, whatever.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd want to broach? You'd want to say right now?
Yeah, well, I want to just encourage people to vote. I think everyone thinks about voting. They say, "Oh, I don't know what games to vote for," but at least vote for someone you think who's worthy of the Clausewitz Hall of Fame. So that's an award that we don't necessarily issue every year, but we do want to recognize someone who has contributed in a significant way to the war game hobby. And so none of the categories are mandatory at all. So you can vote for as few of the categories as possible, or as many, or all of them if you want. You can't vote for more than them, but you can vote for all of them or as few as you want. So if you're a war game fan, what I would like to say to you is, if you think of someone who hasn't been recognized before, so obviously don't vote for someone who has won the Clausewitz Hall of Fame award before, and the list of previous winners is available on the website, and think about voting for someone that should be recognized. Think about a designer, a developer, or an individual who's worthy of being recognized for this award. That's, I think, most meaningful to people. Our hobby is a hobby of individuals. I think the recognition for someone who is basically, no one makes a lot of money from building war games.
No.
So this is more a passion hobby. So I think it's worthy to recognize people who do that who've given their passion to help us enjoy our lives more.
So Tim, let's say someone is voted again. Let me think of a name here. Mark Herman.
Yep, I've seen his votes in the ballot already multiple times.
So I mean, if Mark Herman is voted again, then Mark Herman is voted again. Is that right?
Well, not necessarily, because we have stated in the charter that votes for people who have previously been elected will not be considered. So we might just say, hey, we might make a PR thing of it for Mark, but necessarily they will not qualify for winning the award again.
Wow, you're going to get flack for that. You know that, eh?
Well, we make it pretty clear. Clausewitz Hall of Fame is an award for an individual who has significant contributions to the hobby who has not been awarded previously. So you can't be voted for the Hall of Fame twice. It's like the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I know.
You can't vote someone in twice.
Right. And I understand that.
But I think he could be awarded for the James F. Dunnigan Award for Design Excellence. So that is an award. There are two broad, I guess, what you would call, what's the word, free agent or multi-category awards. There's the best war game. So overall, cross-category, across genre, across format, print and play, amateur. You vote for one game to be the best war game of the year. Second one is you can vote for the James F. Dunnigan Award for Design Excellence. James F. Dunnigan, if you recall, was one of the founders of Simulations Publications Incorporated, SPI, the second major war game company that came after Avalon Hill. And so that award can go to a war game, an individual, or a company for design excellence. It's a completely free-form category. So Mark Herman could conceivably win that award if someone voted for him for this past year. And I know Mark has recent releases.
Yes. Now, you just made me think of something. What about like Rookie of the Year?
Well, that used to be a category in the past. Yes, that's a great question. But how do you quantify what a rookie is? Is this their first professional design? Is it the first time they've appeared on the ballot ever? It's hard to say. As we expand the awards, or you look at changing awards for next year based on people's feedback, and again, feel free to send us feedback. There's an email on the website. You can contact me directly as well. Just send those things to us. What suggestions you have? Rookie of the Year, it would be a great award, but I'd like to think about how we want to quantify what a rookie is.
Well, I mean, I would say professionally published by a well-known. You see, right away, controversy.
Yeah, because right now it's hard to say. Well-known, a lot of games go straight to Kickstarter and they're produced. I have a stack of Kickstarter games that I don't think I've seen another game from those publishers before. They're not well-known publishers, but they're professionally built games that have been released and have box games that are sitting around. So maybe, yeah, it's hard to say. Best rookie, maybe it's first professional design. And what constitutes a professional design? Is self-publishing through Kickstarter considered professional design? One publisher actually told me, I asked him, what's the difference between professional and amateur? He said, are you trying to make money at it? Are you paying people market rates? Are you intending to use this as moneymaker? It's not just a a passion project or a self-publicity type project. So I think it's going to be hard to. It will be hard, but it's not going to be it's not going to be insurmountable to create a Rookie of the Year award.
Man, my heart goes out to you, Tim, for all the amount of work and I mean, not everything is a conspiracy. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, for God's sake. Anyways, I mean, if there's no questions from the chat, we're going to call this off because I think we've answered quite a few questions. And thank you again, Tim, for being on this. And thank Roger B. McGowan for suggesting this. This was fantastic. I mean, it makes me think how much work is involved in something like that. So,
yeah, and I appreciate that.
Tim,
I can't say that it's, as I said, it is a lot of work, but it's worth it to help give recognition to people who may not otherwise get recognition.
Anyways, stick around. I got a Carl Paradzi. Do you know this war game designer?
Yeah, I know Carl. I bought some games from him on Board Game Geek before. The No Retreat series.
Yeah, he's a great designer, great guy, strange sense of humor, but great guy. Great guy. Anyways, Tim, hang around, chat, people. Thank you very much for doing this again, Tim. Thank you very much. I hope I can speak to Roger and thank him in person one day. I hope I meet you one day. Do you attend cons?
I do attend cons occasionally, but it's just difficult. Most of my gaming now is actually through Vassal and Cyberboard.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just hard to make time for cons these days, especially this year. I don't think there are any in-person cons at all.
Yeah, no, they're not. I mean, I was hoping for WBC and it's the only con I've been to. It's funny. I just love that con. I don't know. I met Mark Herman, John Butterfield, Sean Drulinger, Keith Tracton, Uwe Eichert. The only one I didn't meet was Stuka Joe. Stuka Joe, do something. Come on. Anyways,
yeah, great convention. So last thing I want to say is make sure you vote. Go to https://charlieawards.wordpress.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at charlesrobertsawards@gmail.com.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to your comments.
And Tim, stick around. I'm going to end the show with my famously amazing video skills. And thank you, chat. I'll see you later.